Chapter 6 The Priority of Presentation by Jim Stovall. The most important part of any presentation is the message. All that any presenter can hope for is to accurately deliver the message to the audience. A message must be concise, clear, and specific. Being motivating, inspiring, or entertaining is not a message. A great platform speaker once told me that if you do a great job on stage, you'll be lucky if your audience retains 3 ideas when they get out to the parking lot. I have found this to be true over the last several decades. Most presenters try to deliver far too many aspects or points of their message. I find it helpful to simply tell my audience what it is that I want them to take away from our time together. I tell those who I present to specifically, there are 2 things that you may or may not have known when you came into this auditorium today that I want to make sure you know when you leave. If there is a specific takeaway to your presentation, don't be afraid to label it as such. There are 2 basic types of presenters. There are professional presenters who can speak to virtually any topic given a chance to do some research, and then there are passion presenters who would never stand up in front of an audience for any reason except for the single cause or message that they are totally committed to. Great presenters, actors, or platform speakers can technically fill any role. My company, the Narrative Television Network, makes movies and television accessible for 13 million blind and visually impaired Americans and millions more around the world. When we first launched the network in the early 1990s, to create programming and fill airtime, I hosted a talk show and interviewed many of the classic film stars who were in the movies we narrated for our special audience. I remember the day I got to interview the great film star Jack Lemmon. Mr. Lemmon was known for many great roles, including working with his lifelong friend and colleague, Walter Matthau, on the Broadway stage and movie version of Neil Simon's story, The Odd Couple. One of the most fascinating things I learned from my time talking with Mr. Lemmon was the fact that when he and Walter Matthau were doing 8 shows a week on the Broadway stage for many consecutive months, they would often break up the monotony by taking the Sunday night performance and switching roles. If you ever saw the 2 of them embody their parts in The Odd Couple, either on stage or on screen, you would have to agree that Lemmon and Matthau were perfectly casted actors for their individual parts. It is a tribute to their skills as actors and presenters that they could literally switch parts once a week and still make the play work. Great courtroom attorneys often practice their presentation by arguing their own side of the case. Then they will switch and practice arguing their opponent's side of the same case. A good presenter, given facts and details, can discuss the mating ritual of snow geese, explore the erosion rate around the Great Pyramids, or argue the benefits and drawbacks of the Industrial Revolution. Presenting is like acting. It is a skill that can be learned and developed. I have had 7 of my books turned into movies. I have had the privilege of having characters I have created embodied by legendary actors such as James Garner, Peter Fonda, Raquel Welch, Academy Award winner Louis Gossett Jr., and many others. I remember working on casting for the movie version of my novel entitled The Lamp. The Lamp story features a mysterious character somewhat like a magic genie who emerges from an ugly garage sale lamp. My first thought was to have Barbara Eden play the part. Many fans of classic TV will remember Barbara Eden starring in I Dream of Jeannie. I thought it would be a fun parody to have her playing a genie-like character again, almost a half-century after she was introduced as a genie in her original role. Fortunately or unfortunately, when I met Barbara Eden, it was immediately apparent that the parody would not work, because she is still a classically beautiful woman, and the parody would have been lost on our movie audience. Next, I thought we could make it a comical character, and I thought of the zany antics of Tim Conway. Anyone who saw Mr. Conway's comic sketches on The Carol Burnett Show will never forget his performances. I talked with Mr. Conway, and while I was confident in his skill and professionalism, I feared that his comedic presence could take away from the gravity of the character. Finally, I thought of the legendary Academy Award-winning performer Louis Gossett Jr. of An Officer and a Gentleman fame. For over 50 years, Mr. Gossett has been a commanding presence on the stage as well as the screen. I remain very pleased and grateful that we chose Louis Gossett Jr. and that he was willing to bring his immense talent to the Lamp movie. As great as Mr. Gossett was in that role, I believe Barbara Eden or Tim Conway could have done an equally great job. It just would have been very different. Great actors, performers, or presenters are skilled at delivering messages to audiences. However, the best among them will tell you they always prefer to deliver a message that matters to them personally. If you want to make a great presentation, begin with a message that matters deeply to you. I recently saw a mother whose child had been killed by a drunk driver. She was making a presentation for the wonderful organization Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. No one would consider this particular mother as a great traditional presenter simply by considering her stage presence or presenting skills. However, her undying commitment to the cause about which she was presenting made all the difference. As a professional speaker, broadcaster, columnist, movie producer, and author, I am fortunate that some past success has given me the freedom to create and deliver messages that matter to me personally. I could write a book or make a speech on almost any topic, but my presentation would lose some of the passion that comes with delivering a message that matters to me. In the 1990s, a trend emerged in corporate America involving every organization developing a mission statement. While I believe a quality mission statement can be a rallying point for any organization, I fear that far too many corporations wasted time and money developing their mission statement and then simply posted the statement on the wall and forgot about it. Being a great presenter involves a message that is tied to one's own life mission. It doesn't really matter if your mission is personal or professional, because if the passion is high enough, the two have a tendency to merge together. I think it is critical for every highly evolved, passionate person to have their own individual mission statement. Mine was ironically developed for me by my grandmother. While she had never been involved with any formal business enterprise or area of presenting, she was able to pinpoint and articulate my passion. Late in my grandmother's life, she had medical care provided for her in her home. Our family knew that her time was short, so we all took every opportunity to visit her. I remember stopping by her home, several hundred miles from where I live, during a trip between two speaking engagements. I arrived late one night and was disappointed to learn from her nurse that my grandmother had already fallen asleep. The nurse was very kind to me and said, "Your grandmother is very proud of you and all that you do." I told her that I wasn't even sure if my grandmother knew what I did. The nurse replied, "There's a framed picture of you holding your Emmy Award sitting on the nightstand next to her bed. She tells everyone who comes to see her about her grandson who does two things. He helps blind people see television, and he tells people around the world that they can have good things in their lives." The minute those words, relayed from my grandmother through her nurse, registered in my brain, I knew that I had my mission statement and my message. I am often called on by corporations for whom I am speaking to customize my presentation to deal with a specific aspect of their business. I gladly do this, but those customized points are always clearly wrapped in my passion involving the message I feel responsible for delivering. I believe we are all put here on earth to find our individual gifts, and our purpose in life involves giving our gifts to others. If you are going to make presentations that matter to you both now and in the future, they have to involve your passion. My passion for the narrative television network and accessible programming came out of my own need and disability. One of the most unique forms of presenting is to make someone else's presentation accessible to an audience who otherwise would not have been able to benefit from it or enjoy it. Immediately after losing my sight and realizing that I would live the rest of my life as a blind person, I didn't write best-selling books, make movies, write newspaper columns, make speeches, or any of the other activities that occupy my time today. That morning I woke up and realized that I had lost the remainder of my sight. I moved into a little 9 by 12-foot room in the back of my house where I gathered my radio, my telephone, and my tape recorder. That little room became my whole world 25 years ago. The thought of traveling millions of miles and presenting to millions of people via the outlets I utilize today would have seemed as foreign to me then as going to the moon. Fortunately, as I look back on that time prior to losing my sight, that little room in the back of my house was our television room. That was where we enjoyed broadcast and cable TV, as well as the numerous classic movies I kept there in my collection. I have always been a huge fan of classic movie stars, which has made the opportunity to have many of my novels turned into films very gratifying. One day, as a totally blind person sitting in my little room that I thought I would never leave again, I became bored and decided to play one of my classic movies. Even though I knew I couldn't see it anymore, I thought I had watched that particular movie so many times I should be able to just listen to the soundtrack and follow along with the story. I had selected an old Humphrey Bogart movie entitled The Big Sleep that I had enjoyed countless times. My idea of following along just by listening worked for a while. But then somebody shot someone else screamed, and a car sped away as I totally forgot what happened next in the plot of the movie. I got really frustrated and I said the magic words, "Somebody ought to do something about that." The next time you get frustrated and hear yourself say, "Somebody ought to do something about that," you just had a great idea. The whole world is hoping and praying for a great idea, and they trip over one about 3 times each week. The only thing you've got to do to have a great idea is to go through your daily routine, wait for something bad to happen, and ask yourself, how could I have avoided that? The answer to that question is a great idea. To take it one step further, the only thing you have to do to have a great business opportunity is to ask yourself, how can I help other people avoid that problem? The answer to that question represents a great business opportunity. Everyone wants to make money when the only people who make money work at the U.S. Mint printing dollar bills. The rest of us have to earn money, and we must remember that money is only earned by creating value in the lives of other people. If you're going to pursue a passion and deliver presentations that are significant and fulfilling, you need to make sure you are meeting the needs of other people. Out of my frustration with the Humphrey Bogart movie, I, along with some very talented and dedicated colleagues, created a great business and an entire industry. We at the Narrative Television Network make movies and TV programs accessible to millions of blind and visually impaired people and their families by adding the voice of a narrator to the programming's soundtrack between the dialogue of the characters. This additional narration describes the actions, settings, and other visual elements of the program. Beyond the work we do for network TV and movie programming, we find it extremely gratifying to be able to make hundreds of hours of educational programming accessible to blind and visually impaired students, allowing them to learn and study alongside their sighted classmates. Presentations can involve your own thoughts and ideas, as well as the thoughts and ideas of others repackaged, reinterpreted, or made accessible. People who translate the work of others into various languages, along with presenters who make the complex principles of others' work understandable, all provide a valuable service and can create powerful presentations. If you're going to make a presentation utilizing someone else's original work, thoughts, ideas, or experiences as the foundation of your message, you need to employ a technique I call putting yourself in the picture. Putting yourself in the picture involves creating a connection between the message and your presentation that involves you. This is why I have played a cameo role in each of the movies based on my novels. If you have a chance to catch any of the films based on my books, and if you don't blink, you will catch a brief scene with a limousine driver, a bartender, or some other insignificant character in the story. That bartender, limo driver, or other insignificant character will look just like me. I'm willing to play anything in the movies, except a blind guy, which is why I started my cameo acting career as a limo driver. The result of putting myself in the movies has been the benefit of putting myself and my audience in the picture when I write about or make presentations involving concepts or messages from my movies. Recently, I heard an interview on the radio about the curator of a local art museum discovering a valuable painting that everyone in the art world had believed to be missing for over a century. I thought this discovery or rediscovery could make an interesting story, novel, movie, or the basis for a point I might want to make in a personal development book or speech. Instead of presenting it to my audience as simply something I heard about, which anyone listening to the radio that day could have done, I called the museum, interviewed the curator, and made arrangements to tour the museum's vault and actually touch the painting that had been lost for over a century. Now I can present to my audience something that has happened to me and not just something I heard about. One of my favorite American authors, Louis L'Amour, wrote over 100 novels involving the American West. He was fond of saying, "If I write about a mountain, I've climbed it. If I describe a trail, I've walked on it. If my characters cross a stream, I have waded through it myself." I believe putting himself in the picture made Mr. L'Amour's writing more personal and vivid to his readers, and may well be one of the reasons he is among the best-selling authors of the 20th century. You've probably heard about the parlor game, The 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, which involves connecting two actors who have never worked together via colleagues they have each worked with in separate films. We live in a connected world, and given the current advantages of social media, there's no person, place, or thing you can't connect to, allowing you to put yourself and your audience in the picture when you're making your presentation. If you're driving down the street and you see a Little League baseball game in progress, you might glance that direction for a few moments. But if the game includes your child or grandchild, it's a whole other matter. Owning your message and creating passion for your audience is the key to creating transformational presentations.